Welcome to another chat on Spotify Greenroom, so that you guys can ask your questions directly. If you follow me on Spotify Greenroom, it seems simple. I say it seems simple. I have no idea if it's simple, but essentially, you get an alert. It tells you that I'm coming on Spotify Greenroom, and then we can have a little bit of chat. All you need to do is raise your hand, and that's essentially how this thing is done. The screen's a little bit delayed there. So if you are in the room at the moment, feel free to raise your hand and ask a question. I think I did one maybe earlier this week. We're just trying to get them right for our YouTube page and everything. So if you do have a question, ask, and ye shall be answered. I assume that's how it works. There can be a bit of a glitch sometimes with the room when it comes to there can be a bit of a glitch when it comes to the requests sometimes. So I know that if you have an iPhone, it is much easier for me to be able to see your questions. But I've been told that Green Room are sorting that out. So if you do have a question, just put through a request. And something has gone horribly wrong with my video recording at the moment, which is going to panic my producer more than you will know. So I'll just try that one again. But yeah, if you do have any questions, chuck them through on the request. I'm trying to think what I've been doing. I've been writing about Pakistan's first win over England today for double century. So there's some fun. Oh, what is going on? This camera, this does not want to pick up at all. Avi is going to ask a question. Avi, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, mate.
Yeah. I was just wondering, we've got a lot of discussion about second string and third string teams playing. I think England, Sri Lanka's practically playing their second string team right now. India's going to play their second string team. Do you think this is something which premier players will going to continue to have a problem with because they're going to end up missing out on games, potentially lose ranking points, and when they're at their peak of their careers, if I look at someone like Johnny Best, who I personally do not see him as a test batsman, but um, at his peak he scored like 1,700 runs in a test year, had a massive year that at that point of time. But at something like today, if there was a concept of which there is, like rotation policy in England, he probably would not be playing Test cricket, and he would have missed out on that huge chunk of his year where he scored half of his Test runs. Do you think players of his kind would be happy going forward, not playing a majority of the other formats while they're playing the one they're best at, or do you think this is how things are going to go forward?
Yeah, it's obviously it's a really interesting question that you have on the ranking points. I don't. I maybe there are some players. If you're one of the best players in the world, I don't think ranking points really mean anything to you. I think if you are a player who is not particularly good when it comes to, if you're a middle of the range player, I think being ranked number one or number five is really important. But no player is playing to be the number two or number three ranked best player in the world. So I don't think that matters at all. I think essentially we play too much cricket, and this is a natural progression of that. We really see a lot of leagues around the world are resting their players over and over again. So it's a common thing. It's not going to go away. Um, I really, I mean, again, while it is great to make 1,700 runs in a test year, if you were to say to a player, look, and Bairstow's a weird example, but if you were to say to Jimmy Anderson, we think we can get you to play till you're 40 or 41. And the way to get you to play until you're 40 or 41 is going to be that you don't play every test. You probably don't play back-to-back tests very often. We probably don't want you playing in tests where you might need to play in a four-man bowling attack. We may not want you bowling in a test where we think you might have to bowl 45 or 50 overs. If that's the case, and they can get an extra couple of years out of him and probably eventually get more tests out of him, then it's very hard for Jimmy Anderson or any player really to say that they don't want that. I think cricketers now have the mindset that they want to play in every single test. You can go back to Stuart Broad is a very, very good example of that. But I think most England players have been quite clear every time they've been rested that they haven't been particularly happy about it, one way or another. I mean, if nothing else, it's just not the way that cricket is played. We saw, we saw a situation where folks came in for a test, made 100, and then played the next few tests and completely stuffed up the way that England was going about things. So there's absolutely no doubt that that there is a situation where that can cause a problem. But if you get to the point where, I don't know, you are in other major sporting leagues around the world where you can be like, well, we don't need Messi to play in every game. I think that's probably where cricket is going to go going into the future. So, yeah, I can certainly understand why some of these players are not particularly happy with that. But I don't think it's going away. But excellent question. So thank you very much for that one, mate. No worries. And then we have, is it Daria?
Hi, Jarrod, can you hear me?
I can. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. How can I help you, mate?
Yeah, so I was just wondering about the fact that the data analysis in cricket has gone up in the last few years. If we were to see that the England team has a separate unit now, which is the data analysis unit. So how is data analysis increasing in cricket, and where do you see it going? Because I read somewhere that BBL has some around 90 data analysts involved in the tournament. IPL too does have it, but the extent that Mumbai Indians has it is different than the other teams have it. So how do you see data analysis being playing a role here in cricket, and how is it different than the football than the data analysis used in the European football? So what are the different standards? Like, how's the difference in?
Well, it's a different sport. So, football, it's a very hard sport probably to do analysis on in some ways, whereas cricket is very easy. The action is very enclosed. Being that we don't do fielding, if we did fielding, it would be slightly different. But, the way that we currently do cricket, it's basically everything is an enclosed event. There's a bowler bowling to a batter, and we get a bunch of information on it. As far as information, I'm not quite sure how to answer your question because I'm not sure exactly what you're asking. But I think analysis in kind of any field in the world is getting a lot bigger and a lot more detailed. And there's absolutely no reason why cricket wouldn't be part of that. I think we've got this feeling sometimes that cricket is this backward sport, and it is. Don't get me wrong. But realistically, cricket has many different times been on the cutting edge of a lot of different things. I know there are people from other sports now starting to take notice of what we do in cricket to see if they can learn things. That hasn't always been the case. We're still a long way away behind probably football, baseball, basketball, those kinds of sports. But there's a lot of good things going on in cricket at the moment. But essentially, we're in a situation now where we could tell before a test match, if we know that there's a particular kind of pitch that might seem a lot, we can go and have a look at our batters and see which one of them can handle that. And not all of them are going to be able to handle that. That's a very normal thing. Before it would have been done on rumor though, wouldn't it? It would have been done on, do you think this guy is any good or not? And I think we're now in a completely different situation where we can really start to look at it and get to the truth of matters. I remember talking to a player a couple of years ago about them in the short ball, and a lot of people were talking about how this player couldn't play the short ball, and he was saying to me, "I don't get it. Like, I know I went out a famous time to the short ball once, but I really don't feel like I've got a problem with the short ball." So we went and had a look at it, and he was right. And that is so much better than the way the cricket used to run, which was a rumour mill, which was whatever the biggest series was. We remember what they did in that series. We have to get beyond that, and that's what analysis allows us to do. Is that kind of what your question was there, mate?
Yeah, so if I were to make it clear, I kind of wanted to ask if data analysis going forward is going to be the major thing that captains are going to decide. Like, till now we had captains deciding on the field and did not have much of data analysis in the field. Like, we saw the England's data analyst pointing out signs and communicating with the on-field captain. So do you see that being increased in the game in the next 5 or 10 years, maybe like and data analysts communicating through signs? We already know that stuff was conveyed through the drink to the guys who brought drinks for the players. But do you see that kind of role being played by the data analysts that they convey signs and talk to their captains on field? Like, is it going to be a thing where data analysts can control most of the part of the game where previously we had captains instinct?
Let's just stop there. Yeah, let's just stop there. The data analyst is not controlling anything in that situation. What the data analyst is doing is saying, this is our plan for this particular bowler, particularly for Owen Morgan, because he doesn't have a good memory. I mean, that's the reason that they have done it. He can only have so many notes in his pocket. I don't know if Owen Morgan is a player who carries notes in his pocket, but we see NFL players sometimes with entire notes on their arm. So we know specifically that is something that happens in other sports. In that particular case, what you have is, just passing a message from off the field. At the moment, that's fine. I was looking at doing the exact same thing when I was an analyst, so I'm not surprised that Nathan thought about it as well. In fact, my system was incredibly similar to his because I wanted to make it kind of as simple as possible for the captains to understand. So like a coded system, so that obviously the batters are still a little bit in the dark. So no, the analyst is not in charge because the captain still has to make the decision. What you will get now, I think, going forward is beforehand. It was really interesting when I first started working in cricket that there wasn't like a conversation with the captain when they came off the field and asked them a bunch of questions about their decision making. And I think what better coaching and better data analysis allows us to say is, okay, we've now gone through this. This is 5 key decisions that you made, and we now want to go through them to see what you thought, what was your thinking behind them, because the player can see things on the field and sense things on the field that you can't get from off the field. They know if a bowler's not feeling confident. They know what the wind is like, all those sorts of little things. But we have to get to a moment where really we're getting that. And I think before what happened was the captain because it's such an important job in cricket, and it wasn't really dealt with in the way that it should be. So great question. We've got a couple of others coming up, so I will bring up Amateu, which there's no way I pronounce that correctly.
Hi, Jarrod.
How you doing? I'm just before you talk, I just have to clap because I think my producer will be really upset if I didn't do that clap. And I know it doesn't make any sense to you, but that's okay. He understands why I'm doing that. So have you got a question there?
So my question is, recently the news came that 2 new IPL teams are added, and the rule said that the teams can retain 4 players for the next mega auction, which is for the 2022 IPL. So do you think it would be a disadvantage for the 2 new teams, since they might not get to play some of the top players which are already in the first 8 teams?
Of course it's a disadvantage. I mean, you're never going to have a situation where, what are we going to do? Give them Virat Kohli and Jasprit Bumrah? Like, I don't think that the teams already in the league should be doing that. Generally, expansion teams struggle in closed leagues, which is what the IPL is. I think that's a fairly normal thing to have happen. And I think in this particular case, they are protecting, I think 4 players is very fair. Whether it be 3 or 4 players, I have absolutely no problem with that at all. If you have been in the league for over 10 years, or slightly less for some of the teams, I suppose, but if you've been in the league for a long time, don't you deserve to be able to keep some of your legacy items, especially if you've built up brands and everything? I have absolutely no problem with that at all. I wouldn't be expecting the expansion teams to win the IPL in the first 3 or 4 years unless something magical happens and they get lucky with some selections or just get lucky in some games. But that's kind of the way it should be. They should be struggling over the first couple of years, trying to build an identity, trying to maybe find some competitive advantages over the other teams that the other teams haven't yet noticed. Maybe new tactics, maybe new ways of finding young players, whatever that may be. So yeah, I think it makes perfect sense to be able to do it that way.
Thanks.
No problem. Arjun, I saw that you have asked the question, but then I brought you up and you were hitting a nail. So if you want to come up, feel free. But if anyone else has any questions, as I said, I was working on a piece on, what was it? I'm trying to think now. Oh, Pakistan, wasn't it? The history of Pakistan cricket, which was a very, very interesting one. And their first test, and reading a lot about Fazal Mahmood. You should all read more about Fazal Mahmood. Arjun?
Hey Jarrod, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. How are you, mate?
Doing well, Jarrod. Thanks. So I guess my question would be a bit about the IPL as well.
Mhm.
The question would be if tomorrow the world became a perfect place and we started allowing Pakistani players to play in the IPL, which maybe 4 or 5 players do you think are a must pick up and maybe even on the point of expanding?
Oh, you just dropped out. So I'll answer your first question. You can answer the second
Suddenly
one.
they were allowed to.
Uh, sorry. You just dropped out. I'll answer the first part of the question, and you can follow up with the second part. If I have to go through all the numbers, obviously for Pakistan, but off the top of my head, I'd probably be looking at Mohammed Rizwan. Obviously, Shaheen Afridi would be incredible. Baba Azam, if I needed that kind of an anchor player, makes sense. Oh my God, I've forgotten the name of the big six hitting bloke. Asif Ali is an interesting one that I might keep on my bench for certain situations. But yeah, there's always going to be a Pakistani quick bowler coming through, isn't there? Shadab Khan's a really interesting one as well. I know that he's so hated by Pakistani fans a lot of the time, but he's a phenomenal talent. He's a true cricketer, a true all-round cricketer, in that he gives you fielding, batting, and bowling. Even if at times, he's a bit lackluster in some of the more key parts of his career. But yeah, I think there's a lot of very good Pakistani players out there. That would be, I mean, you could see if the IPL opened up to Pakistani players, you'd think that there would be a lot of sort of younger Pakistani seam bowlers suddenly, a bit like what happened with the Big Bash, in fact, where we suddenly get a young Pakistani seam bowler out of nowhere who can, bowls incredibly. But there's a lot of good bowling talent in the PSL. Some really, really good cricketers. So yeah, I have Shaheen Afridi is probably the number one pick, though, isn't he? I think he's just an incredible bowler, and there's absolutely no doubt that he would be, in an IPL team, and not just in the squad, but literally starting the team. But there's a lot of good players there. And sorry, what was the second part of your question?
The second part of the question would be if, I mean, we've seen the second teams going around all over the world, and we've also seen a WTC start as a league format for tests. Would it make sense to start a league format for T20? Because there are more players playing T20 anyway, and you'd be able to have a lot more games, which is what, the ICC seems to want. So do you think that's something we'd see in the future, maybe like a World T20 league for international?
Am I being silly? Is there not a Is there not a T20 league already? And there's one for one-day cricket and Test cricket. Is there not one for T20 cricket as well? I'm trying to think. Maybe you're right. I'm now confusing myself. But we already have one for one-day cricket. I personally wouldn't want a league for T20 cricket, because I really would prefer that T20 cricket is played at the Commonwealth Games, the Olympic Games, and the World Cup. I think the rest of the T20 games that are played should be friendlies. That's certainly how I think it should be best done. There's more than enough league cricket for teams to get to know which players are best and which players are not best. If coming into a tournament, they want to play 6 to 12 months of T20 series around the world to get ready for a tournament. That makes perfect sense. But no, I don't think. I think one-day cricket and Test cricket need a league. I think World Cups and Olympics is more than enough for T20 cricket as it is. But thank you very much for your question. Sorry. And just coming up next. Oh, Daria again. How you doing, Daria?
Hi, Jared. I just wanted to say that I've spoken before, so if you want to take someone that hasn't spoken before, you're free to. But I just had a little question that listening to Arjun speaking about the T20 talent that countries have, do you think that India not allowing its players to go and play the T20 leagues around the world is hampering the talent, that we might have a bigger talent pool than most of the countries we already do have, but we might have an even bigger talent pool if we allow the non-contracted players by the BCCI to go and play in the T20 leagues foreign.
Yeah, I think that's a mistake, and I understand it from. I understand why you don't want Virat Kohli playing in the 100 or the Big Bash, if you're trying to keep a competitive advantage. But I think the players outside the top 25, say, or the top 35, I think it actually makes more sense for them to be out there playing in these leagues. What Rahul Dravid has managed to do with India A is great, and I think that should obviously continue to go on. But I think there are so many other things that can be done, to develop your players. And one of the things you've talked about there, I think the other thing is that there should be a proper, and it's not just that, there should be a proper second division of the IPL. So whether you want to call it a minors or what do they call it in the NBA, a G League. But I think there should be a really, really strong level of the next best players playing up against each other as well. That will help the IPL teams develop talent, but it will also just help the Indian team with, one of the greatest things that ever happened in cricket, which Cricket Australia kind of ruined, was their second 11 structure and making it as much like Shield cricket as possible, so that they basically almost had two levels of Shield cricket going on, a development league and a full league. And I'm a huge advocate of that particular plan. So yeah, I think for India, they've obviously got the A stuff covered, but why would you not want your players, your players playing in the Bangladesh Premier League or the South African Premier League? No, it's not going to take any gloss off the IPL. It's going to help you develop players. And then, as I said, the other thing is this second division type league, which I think will probably eventually happen. You could have it in more regional areas and have sort of spin-off teams from the IPL there. So yeah, I think there's certainly quite a few options there. But that's a really good question. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Jarrod.
I've just got a written one coming in from Connor. What is your ideal English bowling attack for the Ashes? Mine would be Stokes, all-rounder, Wokes, Archer, Leach, Anderson, Broad, Mahmood, Stone, Curran, and Wood as backup. Yeah, Leach will be interesting because I don't think they'll play Leach, Connor, unless they're sure Australia's going to play a lot of right-handers, and Australia does not generally play a lot of right-handers. So if that's the case, I think they might. I think they wanted Bess, and obviously a lot's gone on with Bess since then, and I don't think Bess would be massively. Although he does get overspin, he would be suited that way to Australia. But I think it's a very tough place to play if you're not completely in control of your bowling. And I've been saying for a very long time, I don't think Dom Bess can land the ball exactly where he wants to land the ball. So yeah, I certainly think that is I think that is a problem. And so the Leach thing for me is a little bit interesting. I think that your call on Wokes is fine. If they're going to go in with Wokes, or if they're going to go in with Anderson, because you would assume they will, it would be very interesting to see if they go with Wokes or they go with Broad. I think Wokes' batting might be slightly better in Australia than it is in some other places, just because I think he likes the ball coming on a little bit. I remember him making a 50 or so, might be a 50 in a T20 game for England, the MCG, and thinking this is a good place for him to bat. But having said that, I just don't know about. I don't know about that. You're picking a bowler that you're not 100% sure of because your batting's not up to it. I think that's a mistake that a lot of teams make. I can certainly see why teams will do that, and I can see why you're thinking that is the best option. But I think as a general rule there, I think that's risky. But I don't think there's anything wrong with the bowling lineup that you've talked about there, and I could certainly see why England would go ahead with that. But I think I would prefer Wood or Stone or maybe even Broad in certain situations to Wokes, unless Wokes is just looking like he's going to take a ton of wickets, and in that case, go with him. I think he's a great bowler, but I don't think England want to be in a situation where Anderson and Wokes are both in the team and the ball just doesn't do anything for them. I don't think Woakes can make enough runs to overcome for that. And he's not just overcoming himself, he's overcoming Anderson. And we know how good Anderson can be. But we also know that there are going to be tests where he's just not going to be able to dominate with that ball in those conditions. But excellent question. If anyone else has a question coming through, you can do what Connor did if you want me to read it out and skim it, as I just did there. But feel free to put your hand up and ask some questions. Obviously, we've already had a couple about the IPL and now about the Ashes. Avi's come through. Avi, how can I help you?
Yeah, just something that's been on my mind. So I am a data scientist by profession / education, blah, blah, blah. So I just do a lot of this thinking in the background about how I think we look at numbers today very superficially, especially seeing the whole discussion about the Fab Four. Just batting numbers. As soon as someone crosses batting average of 50 with like 4,000 odd runs, we suddenly put him on a pedestal that, he's the best in the generation. But then we're overlooking a lot of people who are not approaching that average, who would like end their careers at like 46, 47. So I've just been having this thought in my mind that, full disclosure, I've been following English cricket since like 5 years now. So I do have a bias towards Joe Root here, but having so much of this, I think he gets, he is extremely underrated in the fact that we compare him with people who've had solid top orders over the years, who haven't had to take the pressure. Or it could be any other player as well. I'm just picking an example here. But do you think we not look at factors like the median overs or median runs on board when a particular batsman comes on the crease, takes over the pressure, how many overs of the new ball he's potentially facing, and the kind of conditions he bats in? I know you talked about this in your, I think in your video about the English batsmen very recently, where batting in England is probably, you should be averaging 5 less than anywhere else to be on the same pedestal. So do you think we're like overlooking a lot of these factors? If you see that India has become a much better place to bat for our domestic batsmen, because players like Kohli average like north of 60 right now, whereas like Sachin and Dravid averaged nearly 50, 52 in their entire careers, and they managed to hold the same average as Kohli because they averaged almost 10 runs better away from home. So do you think just looking at pure numbers, we are kind of pushing some people away from the kind of greatness they deserve, and maybe trivializing a lot of other factors which makes Test cricket what it actually is?
I just think it's a very early time for everything you've just said. So I think Test average is a very, very good metric to understand the overall quality of a player. But quite obviously, it's very limited in what it can and can't do. None of us are sitting here thinking that Adam Voges is the greatest player in the world, are we? And yet he has this incredible average. So we know that there are many other factors. I think there's, something we've worked on for T20 cricket, which we haven't really brought across to Test cricket yet, because a lot of the way that the numbers are don't really come across. But if you think about it on a basic thing, when Joe Root goes out to bat second drop, and the score is 18 for 2, for instance, we can in that situation work out what a number 4 would score on average. And we can also factor in what a number 4 might score in England on average, and then work out what he did and come with a sort of a plus minus system. I don't know how that works with second innings, and you'd have to factor in the lead with the second innings, which team was in the lead, which team wasn't in the lead, those sorts of things. You would have to factor in what day it is as well. It's a big difference between batting on the second day and batting on the 4th or 5th day, for instance. So yeah, there's a lot of different factors that need to be brought in. I think that really isn't that many people doing advanced red ball analysis outside of the teams themselves, and they obviously don't talk about what they do specifically. But yes, I would certainly say that in that situation, there is a lot more information that we can find out, and that we can be kind of involved with and use to develop the way that we look at these things. But it is what it is. We are very early on with these things, but there's a metric fuck ton of what we could actually add to all this. I think it was when Cricket Australia, I think Tim Wigmore has used this quote a million times, but I think it was when Cricket Australia hired a data team to come on and help them. And they called Test cricket the monster. Because I've just gone through a couple of variables, but there are just so many variables to Test cricket. T20 cricket, in comparison, is incredibly easy. It's not as easy as basketball or baseball, but in comparison, T20 cricket is quite a simple game to work out the worth of a player in that particular innings. Test cricket, there is a lot to be looked at, like little things too that you've just talked about there. Like I know there are a lot of people who don't rate There are a lot of people in analysis at the moment who don't rate players who take the shine off the ball. But that's probably because we haven't done a lot of analysis on what happens further on down the order. So if Pujara makes 30 off 150 balls, and when he makes those innings, is the overall batting average higher for everyone else down the order? Does he make it easier for people to make runs compared to when he fails? Does he make it easier to make runs compared to other days when he scores quite quickly? All those sorts of things we're not even factoring in yet. So I think there's a lot to be looked at when it comes to Test cricket. And yeah, we really, outside of the teams, I don't think anyone's really spent that much time on it.
Right, yeah, got it. I think, yeah, the Jara analogy was like a good example because that's a tertiary effect of his bat.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know how much we have to clarify it and how much we factor it in. But here's my thing. I know that I basically want my batters now to face as many balls as possible, and I want my bowlers to take their wickets as quickly as possible. So I don't care if all my batters have a strike rate of 35, but they can all average over 40. I'm okay with that. And if all my bowlers are strike bowlers and maybe average, 25 to 28, but are taking wickets every 40 to 45 balls, what I have created then is a system where I can tire out the opposition bowlers, and my bowlers should have plenty of time to rest, right? And how we factor that in to everything I've just said. I've got a friend who said that if we get a really good analysis system, and it may be CricViz's one, but if we got a really good analysis system, we could almost tell on a ball by ball basis if what the team is doing, if what the player is doing is affecting the game positively or negatively. And I suppose that's true. But I don't know if that's a better system than the one I've kind of talked about. My guess is that it will favour certain kinds of players, like most early systems do, and then we'll have to refine it. But it'll be really interesting to see how that goes. But it is fundamentally harder to open the batting than it is to not open the batting. It's fundamentally harder to bat in England than it is to not bat in England. And the opposite is true if you're an Australian bowler. It's harder to bowl in Australia than it is in other places. And we don't factor any of these things in generally. And I think it's a bit of a problem. If anyone else has any other questions, I've got about another 5. I've got a time for one last question. Oh, my man. Now I'm going to get this right because I've now pronounced this 5 different ways. Is it Dharya? Now it sounds like I'm just...
It's pronounced as Dharya.
Dharya, okay. I got it wrong again, but at least now I feel like you and I have got a relationship. Your last question. This is it. This is for all the marbles. What have you got for me?
Yeah, so I was listening about the averages, and thought came to my mind that previously in the last 15 years, we've seen that the average scores in Test cricket has gone down. The runs that team make, but we had better bowling attacks presumably. Before, but now, what could be the reason that batsmen do not make as many runs as they used to previously? Is it just that the pitches have become more suitable for the bowlers, or has the concentration levels of the batsmen gone down due to T20? Or what do you think may be the reason that teams are not making as many runs?
Take a seat. I got plenty for you here. The whole T20 thing is really interesting because if T20 is ruining our batters, why are our bowlers getting better? So what? Somehow T20 is making our bowlers so much better and our batters not better is a really, really interesting one. Then it's for another day. But essentially, a bunch of different things have happened. The first one is analysis now exists. And we now know the exact weakness of a player. We don't have a rumor of it. We don't have an idea of it. We know exactly where to bowl to a particular player. We don't have the same kind of analysis to target bowlers in the same way. So that helps. That certainly helps batters. Helps bowlers a lot. We also now can coach to that analysis. So, okay, the first thing we found out was, we should bowl around the wicket to left-handers more often. Right-arm bowlers should bowl around the wicket to left-handers more often. Great, that's great information. But if I've grown up and I've never bowled around the wicket to a left-hander, right? How do I do that? So now we're matching the analysis with coaching, and coaches are now working on bowlers. This is how you bowl around the wicket. This is what you should be looking for. This is what will suit you. With the pitchers doing this, this is what we want you to do. These sorts of things. Those are two huge movements. The other one is that bowling now, we are combining. I think we're in our fastest bowling era ever, which doesn't mean I think we have our fastest bowlers. It's more, if you want to say Tomo and Tate and Akhtar were quicker than the current crop, that's up to you. I don't really care that much. But we have more guys who can bowl 90 miles an hour now than we have ever had at any time in cricket. And once you get guys at 90 miles an hour, the game does, massively change. And so that is a huge, huge thing. We are matching that up with advanced skills, and some of these might even come from T20 cricket. I think fast bowlers are more accurate now than they've ever been before. I would say there has never been a bowler as fast, as accurate as Pat Cummins. The ability to basically drop the ball on the same sort of spot that Vernon Philander does, not quite with the sideways movement or the bowling brain of Vernon Philander, but to be able to land the ball on a spot for hours on end. Pat Cummins has that ability. Dale Steyn was an incredible bowler, maybe even better than Pat Cummins, but he would occasionally overpitch and he would occasionally bowl too wide. Go and have a look at some of those spells that Pat Cummins bowled to India. There were no bad balls. Like people kept saying, Pujara should be showing more intent. Intent to what? Ideal test delivery. And here's the other thing that I think has changed massively, and we haven't talked about enough, and I certainly should have done more work on, the wobble seam. The wobble seam is maybe the best invention in fast bowling arsenal since the bouncer. The Yorker, I'm trying to think of other balls that have had an influence. Yorker had a bit of an influence. Outswingers, cutters. Yeah, so the bouncer and then the wobble seam. So what the wobble seam does is it takes one thing away from the batter, which is their ability to tell more or less which way the ball is going to go. Now, if you're facing someone at 90 miles an hour, you're making most of your decisions as they're running up and in the first little while as the ball leaves their hand. If the ball's wobbling out of their hand, or you have suddenly now lost a huge advantage to be able to tell. You can't tell exactly which way the ball is going to swing. You can't tell exactly which way the ball is going to seam. You can't tell if the ball is going to swing or if the ball is going to seam. And I think all of those things have come out at the same time, but I also think that there has been certainly an effort to change the pitches a little bit in Test cricket to make them slightly more bowler friendly, because the era we had just before this was the greatest batting era probably in Test cricket history. If you want to know more about this, the next podcast that'll come up in Red Ink is hilariously kind of all about this. And you can listen there. It's a really, really interesting chat that I have with Daniel. You'll really, really like it. But yeah, essentially, I think a bunch of different factors have come in together at the same time. And we saw a similar thing happen with baseball. And baseball's obviously a very, very different sport to Test batting. But essentially, baseball, the hitters really struggle with the advanced analysis. And we haven't even got to the most advanced analysis in cricket. But even just getting in there, usually those things, for whatever reason, tend to favor the people who are delivering, not the people who are accepting. So huge thanks to everyone who asked a question. Sorry if you are on Android and your question didn't slip through the net. Spotify Greenroom have told me that they will be fixing that coming up shortly. But great questions to everyone who did ask a question. I had a lot of fun as always. I think we're going to try and do this as a fairly normal Friday thing. We'll whip it up on YouTube and we'll put it out on the podcast as well. So if you do want to listen to it back, but great questions. So feel free to jot them down during the week, and then when you have one, bring it out. But thank you very much for listening, and I'll be chatting to you all again very soon. Goodbye.